If you don't know the name Skull Island by now, we can only assume that you've been living under a rock. It's the home of Kong, our beloved giant ape, and that dangerous and mysterious place has remained in our memories for decades. This island has secrets buried in its jungles, hidden behind massive walls, lurking in deep caves, and even floating in legends. The island always keeps a little bit of itself hidden, and that's exactly why it's so fascinating. So let's get started and explore some really interesting facts lurking about the island. But before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Skull Island's location and shifting maps. While we would all love to explore Skull Island someday, the location of the island seems to shift a lot. It doesn't have a fixed geography and varies across the franchise. In the 1933 film King Kong and the sequel Son of Kong, the island is deemed to be located roughly 2,000 miles west of the coast of Prehistoric, Indonesia. It's portrayed as an island with a huge skull-shaped mountain at the center, surrounded by rugged terrain, jungle, and rocky shores. The 1976 remake of King Kong also shows the island somewhere near the west of Indonesia. However, this time around, the island was missing the Skull Mountain. The 2005 Peter Jackson version of King Kong was much more precise with the location. As per the book, The World of Kong, Skull Island was located precisely at 6 degrees 5 minutes south, 93.0 degrees east. This was supposed to be in the west of Sumatra, with the return of the skull-shaped mountain. As if these changes weren't hard enough to navigate, the coordinates were changed again in 2017, in Kong Skull Island in the MonsterVerse. This time, the makers placed the island in the South Pacific, with the exact coordinates being 15 degrees 36 minutes 41.0 minutes south, 157 degrees 0 minutes 16 seconds east. These coordinates were presented in the marketing materials. In this version, the island didn't just have a skull-shaped mountain. Instead, the entire island was shaped like a skull when looked at from a bird's-eye view. There's even a perpetual storm around the island to keep it hidden at all times. In Godzilla King of the Monsters, there's a map that seems to place Skull Island off the western coast of South America. So why these major changes? Well, firstly, because the island is, after all, fictional. But also, in earlier movies, with a limited budget, the makers tried to keep things more simplified, and over time, facts changed to add to the realism of the story. Prehistoric ecosystem. Before we explain how and why the so-called lost prehistoric creatures survived on the island, let's first explore some creatures present on Skull Island. These included giant arthropods and insects, such as ants, wasps, and locusts, as well as mutated beasts like the mire squid, amberpede, meteor bug, and spore mantis. And of course, the prehistoric titans like the great apes and skullcrawlers. But the major question is how these giants managed to survive for so long. Several in-story mechanisms and environmental features are used to explain this. In most movies, the island was skillfully hidden by mechanisms like a perpetual storm. So this meant that the island was safe from human interference, predation, and habitat destruction. This gives a buffer for ecosystems to remain undisturbed. Moreover, there are also mentions of subterranean passages and hollow bedrock, which seemed to serve as an underground habitat to house the creatures and protect them from surface challenges like predators and storms. You have to understand that the island is completely isolated, so these ancient creatures had a long time to co-evolve and adapt to the environment of the island without being disturbed. Origins in King Kong lore. Skull Island is the home of Kong. There's no King Kong lore without the island, so it shows up in the first ever 1933 movie itself. It was the mysterious uncharted island that the expedition traveled to and eventually found Kong. It's presented as the final destination of Carl Denham's expedition, a place spoken of in hushed tones, surrounded by fog and danger. Interestingly, in that 1933 film King Kong, the name Skull Island is never spoken. The island is instead referred to informally as Kong's Island in some materials. The name Skull Island simply seemed to stem from the skull-shaped mountain featured on the island. Later, the name was formally introduced in the novelization of the film by Deadliest. From its very origin, Skull Island is not just a setting, it's the beating heart of the King Kong myth. It's here that Kong rules as both god and beast, worshipped by the local people and locked in constant battle with the island's prehistoric creatures. The land functions as a time capsule where dinosaurs and primeval monsters still live. The Iwi tribe. Have you ever noticed how every monster story has people in the shadows who already know the truth? On Skull Island, that role belongs to the Iwi. The Iwi are the indigenous people of Kong's home, and they've been living with these colossal creatures for generations. The Iwi tribe is known to be extremely spiritual, and for them, these titans like Kong or Godzilla are their gods or protectors, and not just some random monsters. Their culture is ancient, and it's alleged that their descendants migrated from the Hollow Earth. Why they migrated, however, is still a mystery. Some speculate that they simply followed the Titans, and others believe that they were fleeing from some war or disaster. Their beliefs go deep. They refuse to speak the names of the deadliest monsters, as if saying it out loud might call those creatures back. It's fascinating how this tribe has a symbiotic relationship with Kong. They respect Kong, and in return, Kong protects them from creatures they actually fear. They mark their bodies with paint and tattoos, take pilgrimages to sacred sites, and hold rituals in honor of Kong and other powerful titans. It's not worship in the Western sense. It's more like respect mixed with survival instinct. Originally, the Iwi tribe didn't have any formal language. They communicated with gestures, and the Hollow Earth branch of the tribe could even communicate telepathically. Over time, they seemed to learn some English after being introduced to outsiders during expeditions. The Giant Wall. The Giant Wall is an iconic part of Skull Island. So here's a detailed look at that. The wall is a massive stone fortification that encircles or surrounds the area where the natives' village is located. It separates the village from the dangers of the island. It's not like a palisade or a crude fence. It's more like an extremely sturdy stone structure made by an ancient civilization, meant to last forever. So yes, the wall definitely predates the current native inhabitants of the village. Some theorize that the wall might have roots in Southeast Asia. Different sources give slightly different estimates regarding the height of the wall. In the world of Kong and related lore, sailors estimate it at about 100 feet high. Some other materials, like novelizations or scripts, suggest up to 200 feet. The shape of the wall is like a circle, or a near circle that stands between the inhabited zone and the jungle. It creates a safe zone for the villagers and keeps out the dangerous creatures, including dinosaurs, monstrous beasts, and more. It's not just functional, it also serves as evidence that Skull Island once had a sophisticated culture. The wall, temples, and carvings all show that there was once a civilization capable of large-scale organization. It also has a spiritual role for the villagers. For example, while performing the sacrifice ritual, the natives stand atop the wall to fire off alarms, indicating that they are offering a sacrifice. Unfortunately, while the wall might have been really effective historically, by the time the Venture expedition arrives, the wall is old, parts are crumbled, and many of the interior structures are overgrown or destroyed. Skullcrawlers. The Skullcrawlers are the nightmare fuel of Skull Island, and for good reason. These creatures are native to the island, but unlike many of the other bizarre beasts that live there, they come from deep beneath the surface. Most of the time, they stay underground. But when something disturbs them, like explosions or seismic activity, they rise up, and that's when the real trouble begins. Their name actually came from Hank Marlowe, the stranded pilot in Kong Skull Island. He called them Skullcrawlers because of their eerie, skull-shaped heads and their unsettling crawl. Physically, they're horrifying. They've got these elongated serpentine bodies, walking on powerful forelimbs without any hind legs. It makes them move in this unsettling, lurching way that's strangely fast. Their tails are almost like extra weapons. Their mouths are lined with sharp, serrated teeth and paired with their durability and aggression. It's easy to see why even humans with guns barely stand a chance. But what really makes Skullcrawlers terrifying is what they did to Kong's family. Kong's parents were killed by them, leaving him the last of his kind. This actually upset the balance of Skull Island as well. Kong's ancestry and family. Kong wasn't always the only one of his kind. Way back, Skull Island was home to a whole species of giant apes, and they were tough enough to hold their ground against almost anything. They were smart, strong, and lived at the top of the island's food chain for a long time. But Skull Island is never peaceful for long, and eventually the Skullcrawlers started showing up. That's when things went bad. The apes and Skullcrawlers ended up in this long, brutal war, and little by little, Kong's family was wiped out. The story goes that Kong's mother gave birth while the Skullcrawlers attacked, and in her last moments, she tucked him away in a cave to keep him safe. His father fought to the end, but didn't make it either. So Kong basically grew up alone. That's a lot to carry, and it explains why he's so protective. Sinking, fading island theories. Skull Island has always been a place wrapped in mystery. But one question that fans can't seem to ask enough is, why is the island so unstable? According to Monarch, Skull Island sits right on top of a massive gateway called the Hollow Earth. Now, this is a place filled with titans and other creatures. That kind of geological setup isn't exactly solid ground. It makes the whole island shaky, especially when seismic charges or bombs disturb the tunnels underneath. Then there's the constant storm system. You probably noticed how Skull Island is surrounded by those violent, never-ending storms. They protect the island from prying eyes, of course, but storms like that also tear away at the island, flooding parts of it and weakening its structure over time. By the time we get to Godzilla vs. Kong, Monarch even had to build a protective dome, Outpost 236, just to keep the ecosystem and Kong safe. Without it, the island probably wouldn't have lasted much longer. And of course, you can't forget the Skullcrawlers. These creatures spend their lives tunneling underground, ripping through the foundations like termites. It might not seem like much at first, but years of that can only make the land weaker. Old city ruins and lost civilizations. Skull Island wasn't always just jungles, monsters, and peril. If you look closely, you'll find the bones of an old civilization scattered all over the place. Broken temples, half-buried statues, crumbling walls. These are signs that people once lived here in a much bigger way than the Iwi tribe we see later. These ruins are thought to be thousands of years old, maybe around 3,000. To be honest, they don't look like something a small village could have built. The style of the ruins is really interesting too. Carvings and artifacts suggest some kind of Southeast Asian influence, but mixed with its own unique flavor. Images of apes pop out a lot too. Statues and engravings make it clear that whoever lived here held giant apes in high regard. It makes sense, considering Kong's kind would have been around back then. Now all that's left are ruins wrapped in vines and silence. The Iwi live among them, but even they don't claim to have built any of it. It's the ghost of a lost culture, one more secret the island never fully gives up. Skull motif and cultural symbolism. Right from the early King Kong origins, there's this huge mountain on Skull Island called Skull Mountain, which we talked about earlier. That mountain became the visual anchor. It's what gives the island its name. That motif does more than look creepy, though. It signals that this place isn't an ordinary jungle. It's filled with hidden caves, threats, and secrets. The Skull Peak gave the place a face, literally, and turned the landscape into something alive, something watching. It made explorers feel like they were trespassing in a land that already belonged to something much older and much scarier. Later versions of the island leaned harder into the imagery. Artists, filmmakers, and storytellers kept using that image because it was instant recognition. You didn't need an explanation. One glimpse of that skull silhouette, and you knew where you were. Monster hierarchy and food chain. Skull Island is a living, breathing nightmare. Everything there is constantly fighting for survival, and nothing comes easy. At the very top of this chaotic food chain is Kong. He's massive, insanely strong, and basically the apex predator. Most creatures don't even try to mess with him, but he's not untouchable. His only threat seems to be the Skullcrawlers. The other monsters on Skull Island aren't any friendlier. You've got Venatosaurus hunting in packs through the jungle, massive Vastatosaurus rex tearing through the land, and those creepy giant spore mantises that can paralyze prey with a single strike. Not all creatures are predators, though. Some are scavengers as well. Each of these creatures plays a role in maintaining the island's delicate balance. Even the island itself is part of the challenge. There are dense jungles, towering cliffs, and winding rivers that create the perfect hunting grounds for these creatures. Oh, and also hiding spots. There's competition everywhere. Food is scarce on the island, so only the adaptable survive. Hollow Earth connection. The Skull Island lore is not as simple as it sounds, especially since Kong has now been tied into the MonsterVerse. According to Monarch, the island is basically a doorway to something massive, the Hollow Earth. Yeah, that mysterious underground world where all the Titans come from. Skull Island sits right on top of a network of caverns and tunnels that connect the surface to that hidden realm. Look around the island and you'll see hints. Giant creatures roaming the jungle, ancient ruins, weird ecosystems that don't make sense anywhere else. It all points to Skull Island having ties to Hollow Earth. Some theories even say parts of the island used to be part of that underground world millions of years ago, before it rose to the surface. Monarch had actually sent missions down there using the Hollow Earth Aerial Vehicle, or HEAV, H-E-A-V. So how would we define Hollow Earth in the simplest terms? In essence, it's that tangible bridge that connects the surface of the Earth with its much more mysterious and ancient underground counterpart. Exploration by Monarch. Back in 1973, Monarch finally decided it was time to see what Skull Island was really about. They'd been tracking weird seismic activity for years. Satellite images made the place look even stranger. So a team was sent in, led by William Randa, a guy who'd spent his life chasing these kinds of anomalies. Houston Brooks was the seismologist, Sen Lin studied biology, and James Conrad was the tracker. They were prepared, or at least they thought they were. From the moment they landed, nothing went as planned. The military set off seismic charges to test the ground. Big mistake. That woke Kong, and Kong wasn't the only threat. They also met the Iwi tribe, people who had lived there for generations. They knew the island's secrets better than anyone. Through them, Monarch learned just how wild and complex the ecosystem was. And that's when it clicked that Skull Island might be connected to the Hollow Earth, a whole world beneath our feet. The expedition didn't go smoothly. Lives were lost, equipment destroyed, but Monarch came away with incredible data, maps, recordings, and first-hand observations. Walls builders and Tagatu people. Long before Kong was the last of his kind, Skull Island was home to a people called the Tagatu. They weren't born on the island. They came from Southeast Asia, fleeing a massive volcanic eruption that destroyed their homeland. They brought their animals with them, including Gowers and the giant ancestors of Kong. Once they arrived, they didn't just settle down, they had to survive. And survival on Skull Island meant building defenses against the endless dangers lurking in the jungle. That's when they built the wall. They weren't a small village tribe like the Iwi. They were a massive civilization. They were clever, determined, and resourceful. They had to be. Over time, they formed a partnership with the Kongs. The giants acted as hunters, guardians, and sometimes even companions. But peace never lasts long on Skull Island. Eventually, the Death Runners arrived. Death Runners were sentient, vicious dinosaurs led by a monstrous queen named Ga. Suddenly, the Tagatu and the Kongs had a common enemy. They fought side by side in battles that shaped the future of the island. Eventually, the Tagatu civilization was lost, leaving behind the ruins for the Iwi tribe. Legendary beasts and flora. When people talk about Skull Island, the first name that comes to mind is Kong. But honestly, that's just scratching the surface. The island is crawling with things that look like they shouldn't even exist. Take the Skullcrawlers, for example. These things are nightmare fuel. 2 legs, long whip-like tails, and jaws that look like they could snap a truck in half. Then there's the mother longlegs, the giant spider creatures that hide in the bamboo forest. Their legs look exactly like the trees, so you don't even realize what you're standing under until it's too late. But not everything is out to kill, though. The skyr buffalo are these massive, almost gentle giants. They look like water buffalo, but blown up to kaiju size. And don't forget the mire squid, a swamp-dwelling creature with tentacles that can drag prey under without warning. Even the flora is as dangerous as it gets. Some vines are carnivorous, others trap insects or birds, and a few are so strange they blur the line between animal and plant. Film timeline and appearances. The Skull Island timeline is messy indeed. Every time Kong shows up on screen, the island shifts a little. The very first time we saw it was back in 1933's King Kong. The movie never really calls it Skull Island outright. It's just this mysterious, dangerous place out in the middle of nowhere. What we do get is Skull Mountain looming in the background, a massive wall built by long-gone people, and of course, dinosaurs still roaming around. Later that same year came Son of Kong, which revisits the island. But instead of being terrifying, it takes on this almost tragic tone. Earthquakes, storms, the island literally sinking into the ocean. It kind of feels like the filmmakers wanted to close the book on that version. Then we jump forward to the remakes. The 1976 version tweaks things, but doesn't go too far from the original idea. Peter Jackson's 2005 King Kong, though, goes all in. His Skull Island is dripping with details, like ruins, swamps, terrifying bugs, and some of the nastiest dinosaurs you've ever seen. Finally, the MonsterVerse reboot in 2017's Kong Skull Island flips everything again. Now the island is hidden behind a raging storm system. Its shape from above looks like a skull, and instead of just dinosaurs, we get bizarre creatures like Skullcrawlers and flora-fauna. It even ties into the bigger Hollow Earth mythology. Real-world inspirations. When you think about Skull Island, it feels like pure fantasy, too unreal. But the crazy part is, a lot of it was actually inspired by real places and real science. For starters, the idea comes straight out of biology and geography. Scientists like Alfred Russel Wallace spent time in isolated places like the Amazon and Southeast Asia, discovering animals nobody had ever seen before. That whole concept that if you cut off a piece of land from the rest of the world, life evolves in strange and extreme ways is what inspired the franchise. And then you've got real islands. The Galapagos, Madagascar, Mount Roraima in South America. Each one has creatures you won't find anywhere else. Even the look and feel of these islands inspire Skull Island. Even the Komodo dragon played a role. Imagine early explorers hearing about a 10-foot lizard that could kill a man. That's the kind of discovery that makes you believe a Skull Island could be real. Geology plays into it too. The idea of an island cut off by storms, maybe volcanic, maybe part of some ancient landmass, seems too close to Earth's geographic history. Easter eggs in movies. Now, this is generally our favorite part of exploring any movie, series, or franchise. Finding those Easter eggs that makes everything more interesting. Even the Kong franchise is full of little nods and winks, the kind of stuff you might miss if you're not paying close attention. First off, remember when the squad is flying into that massive storm and Packard yells, "Hold on to your butts"? Yeah, that's a straight-up callback to Jurassic Park. Samuel L. Jackson is delivering the exact same line in both films. Then there's the shipwreck. Marlowe shows the survivors this old boat he's been patching up, and if you look closely, the name's Wanderer. That goes all the way back to the 1933 novelization of King Kong, where the Wanderer was mentioned. Also, do you remember Marlowe's jacket? At first glance, it just looks like some ragged leather, but the patches are full of references. One says, "Good for your health, bad for education," which is a mashup of Akira and a weird comedy sketch from Tim and Eric. And we've gotta mention the Skullcrawler fight. When Kong rips open the creature's jaw, it's not just brutal, it's a deliberate callback to the original 33 film where Kong took down a T-Rex the same way. Kong as God and Destroyer. They say Kong wasn't born a god, but after what happened to his family, after he watched Skullcrawlers rip through everything he knew, he swore to guard Skull Island with everything he had. You talk to the Iwi, and they'll tell you straight that Kong isn't just a big ape to them. He's the protector who stood between them and the monsters crawling out from the depths of the island. But here's the thing, gods aren't always gentle. Kong may save lives, but he's also a force of destruction when pushed. You send soldiers in with bombs, chop up the jungle with helicopters, and he's not going to sit quiet. He smashes, he tears down, and he makes sure nothing gets in the way of keeping balance on Skull Island. To outsiders, it looks like rage. To the iwi, it's the cost of survival. This old belief among the tribe that if Kong ever fell, the biggest Skullcrawlers would crawl out and overrun everything. That fear, that unshakable memory of what happened to his kind before, is why they see him as both savior and destroyer. Tragic fate in sequels. You know, Skull Island was never built to last. Every story kind of points to that. Sometimes it's storms tearing into the cliffs, or earthquakes splitting the ground, or the ocean just swallowing up pieces of land like it's nothing. After Monarch went there in the 70s, they basically locked the whole thing up. Not literally, but they buried it in paperwork and made sure no one else could just go poking around. And honestly, that makes it vanish in its own way, for better or for worse. Some versions don't even bother being subtle. They flat out suggest the island gets wrecked. And the truth is, the island needs Kong to survive. Without Kong, the island just can't hold. He's the only thing keeping the Skullcrawlers and everything else from running wild. Influence on pop culture. Skull Island has kind of slipped out of the movies and into a bunch of other stuff. You see it pop up in comics, games, and even board games. Like in 2023, there was this game Skull Island: Rise of Kong. It lets you play through Kong's backstory, from when he was just a kid becoming the massive protector we know. It's not perfect, but it shows how much people want to actually walk around this place, fight the creatures, and dig into the lore. The comics go even deeper. Skull Island: Birth of Kong ties into the MonsterVerse and gives fans more about his ancestry, his battles, and that whole ancient war with other monsters. And Dynamite Entertainment did their own King Kong of Skull Island series, plus some tabletop games, expanding corners of the island. And of course, there's the merch. Tons of it. Statues, toys, posters, you name it, and it's there. That skull-shaped mountain and Kong himself are basically pop culture icons now. People recognize the imagery even if they haven't sat through every film. That's the kind of legacy the franchise has left behind. And if you ask us, that's really hard to compete with. Relationship to Godzilla. Not many of us realized until recently that Skull Island is a part of the same world Godzilla lives in. If you watch Kong Skull Island closely, you actually see Monarch files and old cave drawings of Godzilla, Mothra, and even Ghidorah. That was the first big hint that Kong's story wasn't happening in isolation. The Hollow Earth stuff ties it all together too. Monarch's whole theory is that these giant creatures, Godzilla included, move through tunnels and hidden chambers deep underground. Skull Island fits perfectly into that idea. And of course, it all comes to a head in Godzilla vs. Kong. That movie basically confirms what the legends hinted at. There's an ancient rivalry between Kong's kind and Godzilla's. Without Skull Island, Kong doesn't have his history, his connection to Hollow Earth, or even a reason to step into Godzilla's path. Major expeditions and discoveries. You can't talk Skull Island without Carl Denham. He's the one who first got the map. Denham's big idea was to bring a film crew there. That expedition kicked off all the Skull Island stuff. Once they arrive, everything from the natives to monsters to that massive wall comes into view. He also shows up again in Son of Kong. He returns to the island, but this time with a different goal: to find treasure and help Kiko. Next up is the SS Venture crew, or Denham's crew. They accompany Denham, help us witness Skull Island's wildlife, its danger, and its weird rituals, and also find Andero. And in some later versions, like the 1976 film, there's an oil survey expedition with Jack Prescott and others. Same story, people show up thinking it's a simple survey or adventure. They stumble on monsters, the wall, and hidden villages. They think they're studying the island, but the island ends up studying them back hard. Environmental and survival challenges. Wow, we don't even know where to start with this one. Even before you worry about monsters, the terrain itself will chew you up. The jungle is insane. It has thick vines, tangled underbrush, and trees that block the sun, so it's like walking in shadow all day. Mountains that look climbable are often crumbling. And don't even get us started on the earthquakes and sudden storms. Even more insane is the wildlife. It's full of apex predators that will eat you if they get the chance. You've got the Vastatosaurus, hunting in packs, smarter than you'd expect. Venatosaurus, quick and deadly. Giant insects hiding in the swamps like nature's booby traps. Even siren jaws pretending to be islands so they can snap up anything that gets close. And of course, Kong himself dominates the balance. For the Iwi tribe, surviving here is a way of life. They've got a village behind that massive stone wall, know the paths to avoid, and understand where the monsters hang out. But the outsiders can never be so lucky. You walk in as an explorer, thinking it's a great adventure, and next thing you know, you'll be running for your life. So the real question when it comes to Skull Island isn't what the challenges are. Instead, we have to be asking ourselves, what about that island is not a challenge? Enduring mysteries. Even after so many of those Kong movies, Skull Island is still a mystery to us. Nobody really knows why it's so hidden away. There's that permanent storm that never seems to quit, fog rolling in, almost as if it's nature itself that doesn't want humans finding it. That's probably why the island's creatures, and even the ruins, have stayed untouched for so long. And makers have kept most mysteries unanswered. Take the skull-shaped mountain, for example. It's massive, looming over everything, and it looks like a skull. Some say it's natural. Others think maybe ancient people had something to do with it. No one really knows. The Tagatu people are another puzzle. There are ruins, a huge stone wall, and signs that they lived there long ago. But why did they vanish? Again, no one knows for sure. We can only speculate that the tribe was ended by creatures like Death Runners. Skull Island keeps its secrets. Even after all the explorers, expeditions, and films, it's still out there, untouched, dangerous, and mysterious. Marvelous verdict. So that's Skull Island. Dangerous? Absolutely. Weird? Totally. But beautiful too, in a terrifying sort of way. Every answer you get about it just opens 10 more questions. And maybe that's the point. Skull Island isn't supposed to be tamed. It's not meant to be fully understood. It's a living, breathing mystery. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.